I'm just going to go ahead and do the introductions, and then we can go ahead and get started. First and foremost, let me pull them up. Amanda Griffin is current HR specialist for the Defense Logistics Agency, Master's in Human Resources from Wilberforce University, 13 years in the Army National Guard, and of course, past matron of Grace Chapter 100 of Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Ohio. So welcome for coming on, or thank you for coming on, Amanda.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and then I got Redmond Carolipio, and my computer just went out.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, do you want me to talk about myself? No, I'm just kidding.
So, Redmond is a brown dude, originally from Northeast Ohio, who has lived in LA for almost 20 years. He writes, he edits, he loves sports, and plays a ton of video games. If there's an archetype for a typical dude, it's probably him. Thanks, Redmond, for coming on.
Yeah, and professionally, I work for a business program called Marketplace. It's on. It's part of American Public Media, which is it's not quite NPR, but you can find it on the whatever your local station is. So yeah.
Okay, so what do you do there?
I'm basically what they call a web producer or a digital producer, which is just all things that have to do with making sure the website stays and what you see on the website either adds or complements to what you're hearing on air. So for instance, if this show were on our website, there would be like digital stuff built out for it. And if we were to talk about break different news stories and things like that, there would be actual like articles and stuff. And so I help make sure that all that is kind of kept up. And then we also do some digital only things where you don't hear it on the radio. It's some enterprise journalism and things like that. Just editing those and making sure those are in shape as well. So yeah.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on. And last but not least, I got a lifelong public servant with prolific history in juvenile detention, homelessness, and basic government bureaucracy work. He's also a Virgo who likes long walks on the beach and isn't afraid to drink in the rain. Everybody, welcome back, Jamie Kowalski.
Hi. Can you hear me?
We can.
Lovely.
So right before we got started, officially, I was talking to Redmond. Redmond, where are you at right now?
I live in really close to LA. It's in Pasadena, so where the Rose Bowl and stuff is.
Gotcha. Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, the Rose Bowl's not having their parade, right?
They just canceled the Rose Bowl parade, which is the first time this has happened since like World War II.
Were people surprised that happened? Were you surprised?
I think some people were really disappointed, but I'm not surprised. I'm on the very conservative, pessimistic side when it comes to just opening things back up. I don't think we're gonna see big events like regular events with a lot of people around them until like next year. I really don't. I think maybe we might see some inkling of stuff during the holidays are going to tell us kind of where to go, I think. But as far as like Rose Bowls and big events and things like that, parade, that's huge for this city.
Right.
I mean, it's such a landmark event for just Southern California in general. And it's going to be weird not having it, because I actually live like a couple blocks away from the main thoroughfare where the parade happens. I can actually leave my apartment and walk over and look at and see all the stuff, and I mean it's a ritual over here in terms of what the stores do, how everybody prepares, and yeah, it's going to be weird, but I'm not surprised that they did this.
You're not surprised?
No. It was one of those things where not a lot of people brought it up, but I'm like, man, that's supposed to happen. The preparations usually start. They start talking about it around now, and and there are usual things that I see around Pasadena where the bleachers start going up.
Do you think people are just getting kind of do you think people are getting, what word am I looking for? People are just so used to living under the threat of contracting the virus that they're actually lowering their guard to the point where they're like, if it's going to happen, it's just going to happen. Do you think that's what's happening right now?
I think that is what happened when we started reopening things maybe a month or so ago. I think I've read and I've also heard from just in general, just mental health experts and stuff, where when this first started happening, when COVID first started happening, we looked at it as generally as a thing, and there was like a limit in our mind as to how long we were going to put up with it. Like mentally, I think a lot of people had like 3 months. 3 months, we'll see what happens. And when you get past that, I think mentally something clicked, and a lot of people were like, you know what, I'm just kind of sick of this. Like, I'm kind of just done worrying about it. And so now you have people not wearing masks, and you hear our leadership starting to reopen things and starting to think that we're making progress, which we were. And then the moment that let up, the moment we gave the virus an inch, now we're, plus that mental fatigue I just talked about, now we're about to kind of shut everything back down again. So, I mean, we're on the verge of that. Like, I'm expecting the governor or the mayor or somebody to basically be like, start remandating things again. And
so here in Ohio, we were.
I was about to say.
We were expecting.
I was almost expecting it yesterday, and I think that's what he initially wanted to do. And I think they scared him out of it, because I don't think that was the speech he was going to give yesterday. Because if that was a waste of 20 minutes.
Yeah, I just started seeing on my timeline a bunch of people just very upset with Mike DeWine, and I was surprised because there was just a lot of fanfare for Mike DeWine, especially how he handled COVID early on. Like, he was one of the governors early on that started shutting stuff down when it came to the Arnold Classic. He shut that down, and people were like looking left and right, like, I can't believe he's doing this, given how much money he was, potentially flushing down the drain. And ultimately all for the good. And then to turn around and just see so much negativity about Mike DeWine that, he was being punked out and all these other things. And I don't know. So, what do you guys think about that?
I mean, I've heard people mention it as talk about it. I didn't see the speech myself, but I've heard people talk about it as the pretty please speech, where he was just like, guys, if you want to, you probably should. That would be super cool if you guys did. And I just in my feed and timeline, I got the impression that basically he was just like, please wear masks, as opposed to this is what we're going to do.
Right, and you scheduled a meeting just to say that.
Amanda, yeah, that's what threw me off. It wasn't what he said; it was the point that he had have this special meeting at 5:30 p.m. on a Wednesday just to say that. Basically to say, pretty please wear a mask, and we love our African Americans and our veterans. And
is that really what he was saying?
Yeah. He was just went
so.
on a tangent about how everybody fought to bring Ohio to this point. And he did say, and the African American people who migrated here for a better life for their family. Yes, he went there.
He was here for a better life. I'm pretty sure that's not how it went, man.
He was checking off boxes then, huh? I know.
He was. I promise you, because at first he said the Underground Railroad, and I thought he was done there. Then he went off again, talking about, like I said, the healthcare workers and the other essential employees and teachers. And then he went back to African Americans. Oh yeah, and so long ago when they migrated to Ohio for a better life for their family.
Yeah,
I'm like, who migrated?
Putting it. Running is another way of putting it, but
That's what we're calling it today. Okay.
All right. Jamie?
Part of the thing we all have to wrestle with is, especially because he's a Republican governor, every governor is getting pressure from the federal government to reopen, and they're going at it hard. So they're threatening funding, not doing yet being the operative word.
Right.
And if people in his own party are screaming in his ear, he may well be acting against the very good instincts he had in the very beginning. I mean, Ohio was a model state in terms of, for what that's worth, the entire country carved it around and fucked it up. But Ohio
this
was
is
the best of the worst.
I just remember that early on, like it was almost like Mike DeWine could do no wrong. I knew people who were
it was like Mike DeWine for president. Almost.
Correct. I knew people that were progressives that were like, yeah, if the election were today, I would seriously consider voting for Mike DeWine.
I know here in LA, a lot of people are like, you see what Ohio's doing? Ohio's, got it going on, and that's over here. And we're like, yeah. And it looks like I know for me personally, was like, yeah, I was kind of proud about what Ohio was doing. And then over here, a couple people were like, yeah, I think we're onto something, because LA and our leadership in California, Newsom, like DeWine also had a little bit of that, like, hey, we're onto something. These guys are gonna, these guys are gonna lead us through it. And then, time has passed.
Bro, Washington State still killing it. Mm-hmm. All of those folks though got boxed out by Cuomo, even though Cuomo honestly has had one of the worst track records in dealing with COVID. He's got one of the best responses from the New York Times and CNN and the other, little journalistic plateheads who think the sun rises and sets at the neoliberal horizon. But his record's starting to catch up with him too.
What were you gonna say, Amanda?
Nothing. I was just saying, what?
Yeah.
But I think with DeWine, I think he got pressured. Like I said, I think he was going back to a closure, and I think his friends in probably DC and here in Ohio kind of pulled his coattails and was like, don't do it. And I think at the last minute, in order to keep the support that he has, I think he pulled back. Because like I said, I can't foresee him making that special speech for just that.
My problem.
But Amanda, you probably foresee him doing it again now that he's done it now.
I think as much as I think I know about politics, it just reminds me that I really must not know much about politics, because I would think that, even if the political apparatus were against me, and I know that I can save lives by doing one thing over another, that ultimately it would bode well to do what I did the last time I made that decision, especially if that decision was made just months ago. Given what my public approval rating looked like back then, if that's what I needed to do, I think I would just go ahead and do that again. And if it meant that, come election night, they told me, you got to go, then I would gladly leave and go back to work in my regular life. I'm sure being ex-governor is going to open some doors. You're not going to be on a street corner with a tin can. You know what I mean?
No, you'll get tenure at a university or something.
Exactly. So, what is the real fear? Like, I look at
public speaking circuit. You can do that.
There's like so many things you could do. I'm just looking at some of these guys. You got the governor in Georgia who said,
"Oh man,
he's doing a nomad. He's not going to issue masks." And you got the guy in Florida, Ron DeSantis, getting shouted down by protesters, calling him a failure. Which, he is. That's just an objective statement.
The metrics are not in his favor.
Correct. So
I was watching CNN earlier, and they were saying that he claimed the reason why he hasn't been proactive is because nobody's asked him about the COVID numbers. And so he hasn't been keeping track of everything, and that nobody really cared in Florida. So if they didn't care, he didn't care. That was literally his answer to why he hasn't been doing anything about COVID in the state of Florida.
Didn't they fire the lady that was keeping track of the numbers in Florida because she was keeping track of the numbers in Florida?
Yeah, but he said nobody asked him since the George Floyd incident and the rioting after that. no one asked him about COVID numbers. So he didn't feel the need to track it, basically.
Wow, out of sight, out of mind, basically, for the pandemic. All right.
Didn't Trump just stopped allowing data to go to the CDC and shifted it over to the NIH, or not the NIH.
Health
Could have been the
Services.
Yeah, so he shifted the data over there. So his first recommendation out of the gate in June was to slow testing down. Yes, data is a killer. As I guarantee you, whatever the numbers you're seeing on CNN or MSNBC or Fox or any of them, radically understate how many people have been afflicted by the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
It's a much higher number, and and then there are the other numbers associated to that by people who haven't been afflicted, like the unemployment rate, 50 million people out of work. 30 million small businesses are never going to reopen again. On and on and on. The news just keeps getting better and better.
I think my question is like, what do you think the issue is as far as people still thinking that this isn't real? Like, have you come across people, and it's not just, like, it's easy to say that, oh, it's just the people that believe in Trump, but there are a lot of people who don't believe it's real that look like you and me,
Yeah.
that you'll go to your family reunion and they're like, yeah, but it's all fake news. And I'm like,
they get it from online. I promise you, my friend, we were over here arguing about it last night because he was saying that, well, where Hong Kong is, they only have 4 cases of COVID. I'm like, where are you getting these numbers from? But there are a bunch of conspiracy theorists online who are reporting this stuff, and nobody fact checks. And I guess it's our generation. They don't want to fact check. They don't want to read it for themselves. They want someone to tell them what's going on. And then from there, they just believe it to be the gospel. And then even when you try to show them the text that says this is coming straight from the source, they still won't believe you.
They'll be like, they made that up,
they'll go listen to Richie
so you listening to the mainstream media. That's the problem.
Yeah, MSM, man. No, you can't listen to them. You have to look at joesblog.net, and that's where the real truth is. And it's like that. And there is she just mentioned it earlier, there with our generation, and especially with the training that I had, and a lot of people had, just as digesters of media, and mine in particular, mine in journalism and all that, just fact checking your sources and everything like that was sort of second nature in a lot of ways to our generation. And I'm not sure what happened, but there is another subsect of people out there our age and younger, or even older, where they think of it as in print on a screen. It is true.
It's official.
See, it made it onto the screen. Therefore, this must have been reported, whatever. Yeah, and a lot of people don't know, with the explosion of social media and everybody's access to being able to post things, there almost needs to be like more training in terms of what an actual expert source is versus something that's just on there because they just feed you whatever, versus things that have been researched that come from actual sources that come from, and it takes work, and not many people want to do that kind of mental work. And it's not because they're stupid, it's because with the way our society is on the go, our minds work that way as well. So if I pull my phone up, look on a screen, see words on it, and just bam, digest the information, that should be, a lot of people are like, okay, that should be enough for me, even if the alert comes from some place that isn't like the Associated Press or NPR or some, or something like
verified objective news source.
Something that just says the news, like this happened and this is what they reported, and that's it.
Jamie?
And every so often they will get it right. Every so often. and they'll take that little 1 out of 100 rights and run with it. And then after that, they're just like the best person ever.
I want to take this opportunity to disagree with everything everyone just said, pretty much. Forgive me. The reason for that is there was a study done, I think it was by FAIR, and they took MSNBC, CNN, and Fox and compared their level of accuracy just on matters of objective fact. This is a couple years old now, and the one that got the highest in that rating system was CNN, and they were only at 46%. So then that's to the point of, objective fact and taking expert testimony. Frankly, when you're talking about that, it makes me think we're in a position now because there's so much white noise coming from the mainstream media and independent media, and all the sources you just rightly pointed out are less than credible. You have all that going against you, and then you have these people who who we all say probably don't fact check the way they should. They don't read as much as they should. Yet, Jahi and I share a friend at work, and he reads more than just about anyone else I know. And I think the sources that he reads from, or I think what everyone on this broadcast right now would agree, are terrible sources. Just god awful. But if the mainstream media, the experts, quote, get it wrong 60% of the time, is it really so insane to think that a lot of people are going to run to sources like Alex Jones because, quite frankly, the people that we've all been told are the trustworthy experts and the adults in the room screw up that much?
Well, I would push back and say, from a journalist perspective, having worked at a few newspapers, I've done it. I mean, I remember my editor saying, and I worked in newsrooms that had extreme liberals and extreme conservatives, but one thing that we really cared about was the integrity of the journalism itself. And so I would just say that people that work in a real newsroom, their task is to find the story. Now, they're human, so they'll make a mistake. But I'll say the key difference and the defining factor, in my opinion, between true journalism and some of the nonsense that you can get just because, the advent of technology has flattened the field so that anybody can post anything at any time, is that a true journalist is probably going to try to, vet their information with more than a few sources, either persons or people who are embedded in that particular story, or verifiable information with at least, like I said, 2 or 3 sources. Number one. Number two, if they get it wrong, they'll retract the story or recant what's been said. And I think the ultimate,
your question real quick, just
I think the ultimate consequence of that is the fact that if they truly, truly get it wrong, or for some reason they've done something that's unethical, they can lose their job. I mean, we saw what happened to Dan Rather. I mean, and he was a god in journalism.
He's still working.
He's still working, but I mean, he's nowhere near where he was at the time. Whereas you'll look at
Brian Williams
stations
when
like
Fox,
Fox, and they'll Photoshop pictures, and all those guys are still working.
But see, I tend not to just listen to mainstream media. I mean, I hear what they say, but I tend to like to go read it for myself.
I'm a reader. Yeah.
Right. So they might spark my interest with a topic like the governor of Florida, but then I'm the type that then I will take it that extra step and go out and actually find it.
A bill or
find it. I'm good for reading a bill. I think I'm the only person I know who read the entire Obamacare plan from cover to the end, and that was 1,500 pages. But that's just who I am. Like, it has to spark my interest, and then I deep dive into it and start picking it apart the way I see it.
And I think people have to be willing to say, I got that wrong. And I think that's one of the things that's sorely lacking and missing right now. Like, I like to have a conversation with people, and I like to say, you know, Jamie, I know you've heard this one before. It's okay to have opinions, but if your opinions can't stand up to scrutiny, then what's the point of keeping that opinion? If you have to push misinformation and disinformation down people's throats in order for them to side with you or to make your case, then why are you holding so fervently on to that opinion? You know?
All right. So after hearing a lot of this, I should probably tell you that, like, in my journalism training, I started out as a copy editor, got up to writer, and then I ended up becoming an assistant metro editor for a mid-sized newspaper, which means I helped run the newsroom. And
Sure.
so you end up having a lot of these budget meetings, and in the old school way of doing it, you mentioned like 2-3 sources, and in those newsrooms, and I'll get to Jamie's point about CNN and stuff, and other places in a minute, but the actual the news gets on the page through literally a few hours of discussion from varying different viewpoints, all to make sure that we are not fucking it up, and to have the kind of balance, to have one side versus the other, and to make sure that the people are talking actually know what the hell they're talking about. And all of that training and all that really old school, like old gravelly, old editor like Gurr, whatever,
Right.
all that stuff happened in my background, which is all print. Which, as
Right.
as
That's where mine was.
yeah. So we have a lot of that old. That's why in my media digestion, I actually don't stay too much toward television and broadcast, because the rules are a little different there.
Now, let me ask you this, Redmond. When I was up in Cleveland, I worked in, Lorraine's newspaper, and what we used to see as paper journalists versus the TV journalists, like,
oh god,
we would go and we would cover the story, and then like the guys, the man on the street guy would show up, sometimes with our news articles in their hands,
yes,
in front of a camera, and read it like it was something they just literally, like they dug up themselves. Like, it was really more glamour,
so that's like field reports and stuff like that, where you go in and a producer or somebody gives you a general idea of what the story kind of is, and then you just go there and ask questions about it. Whereas the print journalist is probably if they're doing their job right,
they're in
probably they've done research on who the hell they're about to talk to,
right?
What the narrative is already about out there, and so before they go in there, they're not doing like red carpet questions, basically,
right.
And this might sound strange to any of my other friends who might pick up on this, but when you mention CNN and Fox and stuff like that, yeah, I kind of raise my eyebrows too at what I'm seeing there, because of what I've seen kind of go into a broadcast, go into a newscast, and kind of the producer versus editor discussion that happens there. Whereas in my media digestion, I look at, like, say, the Associated Press.
Right.
I very rarely have been lied to by the Associated Press. They've either gotten something, I can't remember the last time they were just like totally F something up where, someone was, dead, but they were really alive or something like that. Like, nothing like that. And it's really just, it's less about prosy stuff, and it's more about, okay, this happened. This is what they're reporting. Numbers say this. That's it.
Jamie's alarm.
And then in other newsrooms, it's pretty much like that, where, the Pulitzer Prize winning stuff like the LA Times, New York Times. Now, the New York Times also, you got to remember, also has a bit of a slant as well. So,
sure. I mean, and I think that's, it's all based on who the, who the managing editor is at the time.
Yeah.
And like I said, I worked with a guy who was a super liberal on one side of the table, and on the other side of the table, the dude literally had GOP tattooed on his arm.
Oh yeah, I worked with somebody. I mean, I'm, I fall on a certain part of the spectrum, and I used to work with people who had email, who would have a gamer tag of like GOP something rather, and I got along with them fine.
Sure.
But and that all went into our coverage and all our discussions, and that actually made everything better. And that made everything clear. Like you have to have somebody who says, no, the other side's going to say this, and I have this expert, a real expert, like with credentials out the wazoo and everything. And you don't get to, you see that more in print in a lot of ways, and you don't get to see that as much on television, because at the speed that television works, you are going to get the people who have lied to Jamie at one point. You are going to get the people who, yeah. So,
well, what do you have to say to that, Jamie?
I more or less agree with your distinction between television and print. I obviously have never been a journalist, so I can't speak from that perspective. But as an avid consumer of that product,
yeah, like this is what you see.
And, well, what I see is I won't even use the word lie for television. I don't live in their head, and I don't know what's in their heart. I just know how often they're wrong. And print media is not that far off from where I sit. Judith Miller. Let's start there. In my lifetime, the New York Times has been on the wrong side of every major story in my life, and the Associated Press, not far behind. Do I think they're lying? No. Do I think there's a lack of thought diversity in print media? Absolutely. When you have people in the New York Times covering, for example, a progressive whose voice you don't get to hear. It's not even, I am a progressive. Let me just get that out there. I'm as left as you want to get. But I want to hear other voices. I'm a big fan of the First Amendment, and I get easily offended when people come in and say, like Steven Pinker should be canceled because he reported a study in a factual manner that even went against his own politics. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we should be discussing freely. And do I see that in the New York Times, the Associated Press, USA Today, the Washington Post? No. You know what I see? Like, from the last 4 years, what I see is if you don't think Trump is the worst thing since cancer, you've got no place in American discourse. I hate Donald Trump. I think he's a terrible president. Do I think there have been worse presidents? Yes. Can I demonstrate that factually? Try me. George W. Bush is now embraced because he's against Trump. That guy has a body count on his record that far exceeds any post-Cold War president, period. That is objective fact. Millions of brown people in a country that isn't ours died at his hands specifically. Thousands of American soldiers lost. I could go on and on because that's not the only country that he was actually good for was Africa. They love him there, and for good reason. If somebody were to ask me, say something good about George Bush, I could whip that out without even trying. My point in saying all of that is we have to wake up. When I say perspective diversity, I don't necessarily mean black people should be covering black subjects. Muslim people should be covering Muslim subjects. What we're talking about is, because as we see with the Black Caucus in Washington, you can be black and a shitlord just fine. What you want are people who genuinely have thought diversity, come from working class backgrounds, and of course representation is important.
So what do you mean by thought diversity?
With that?
Give me an example of thought diversity. Somebody that's exhibiting that right now.
Tom Cotton wrote an op-ed for the New York Times that I disagreed with to every fiber of my being, that launched a civil war in the New York Times. And the stories differ as to who was on which side, but the side that won was that Tom Cotton's piece, which represents about, 38% of Americans, as wrong-headed as I personally find that, the president was spouting what Tom Cotton wrote. It's worth reporting on. It's worth letting him write an op-ed to express that point of view.
I think we remember that story. Do you remember what the topic was? I vaguely remember that.
It was. Oh God, I lose one more brain cell. I'm a talking lizard.
What was that name again? I'm
Tom
sorry.
Cotton.
Tom.
Okay.
Super conservative dude.
Super conservative.
I remember when I think he was the same guy that sent out his own take on Obama's Iran deal right after the Iran deal. Him and a
Yes.
group of politicians, congressmen, put out a letter, and everybody was talking about what bad form that was, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, if the New York Times was so afraid to print stuff that was just wrong, 70% of their paper would disappear in the flash of an eye.
Redmond,
Because 70% of it is opinion.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I was saying, I thought you had something that you wanted to say about that.
Well, Jamie mentioned thought diversity in, and I mean, this might be a whole other show, but in the media, because you mentioned two things that I'm stuck on: thought diversity, because I think that brings to light a greater discussion as to whether or not there's enough of that in today's media newsrooms, whether it's print or and I don't know. I can't honestly say I can't honestly say there is enough of it, because as reporters, and Jahi, you might know this terminology. We have these things called editor-driven stories. We hate them, but it's when an editor feeds us a story and we're just like,
yeah,
we're doing that.
Yep,
Is
you're
this
doing
the story?
that.
And then they have, and so I'm remembering the thought exercise that that a journalism professor told me, which was, and I'm gonna get this wrong, and I'm sorry, but it's like it comes down to the reporter should knows 100, 90 to 100% of what the story is, and then the farther you go up the chain, the less they know. Well, your assistant editor knows 50%, and then the editor, the person at the top, knows 5. And so when that person in the 10 or the 5% says, "Hey, we should do a story on," that's when that's when the grunts go, "Oh, what would be a good story, Bob?" And then it sort of works in reverse, and you have to develop it from there. But in terms of thought diversity, if a lot of the people in those high chairs in the high table, if we're going to use a John Wick reference, but if a lot of the people at the high tables of these media outlets are of a certain age and of a certain thought process, these are the stories that you're going to get, and these are the perspectives that you're going to get, and that does have to change. That does have to. There is a there's a culture change in the stratosphere that needs to change up there, because so to the point that an editor-driven story won't be as eye-rolling and as scary and as it could be. And on a much lighter subject, I have a love-hate relationship with the New York Times, because the New York Times occasionally like to send writers to LA to talk about Los Angeles as if they were experts, and would end up saying that LA has no culture or no identity, stuff like that. And it's just like, you've lived, and it's like you find that the writer or whoever they put on this, I mean, some have probably lived in LA for maybe a year, maybe 2, or they I spent a summer there, and it's like, and now about LA food culture.
They're giving you their experience.
You're going to tell me what free? You're going to tell me about when to take Laurel Canyon? Are you going to do that?
See, and this is the thing. I kind of look at, I kind of feel that way when a journalist comes into a community of color, and then their quote unquote think piece, and you realize how far off the mark they hit. You know what I mean?
The word think piece just makes me want to drill a hole in my head sometimes.
Well,
I can't. Like, I know I mean, I understand it's supposed to be like some sort of high-minded thing, but like you have people, yeah, exactly. Like what you just said. George Floyd. Let's bring him up. Let's go to his community, spend like a day there, and let's come up with a think piece on it. No. Why? Yeah. What do you have to contribute to that?
Yeah,
it's just like I'm getting more. I'm like, I'd rather hear from Steven Jackson, who knew the guy.
Yeah.
And instead of like 2,800 words on what you think the state of Black America is, like,
yeah, or
I'm not qualified for that.
Like they'll use terms like I've heard. I see this word a lot, and like they'll be like, "I'm tired of all these woke liberals." I'm like, wait a minute, man. Like, I'm not even sure you're using that word correctly, sir.
Is that it? Yeah, exactly. This was like, is that what you're really saying? And they're tweeting it out there or something like that, and they're putting it, and it's like that. Again,
I'm one of the ones who use that terminology.
Well, yeah, but
you know what it is. You strike me as somebody who knows how to use that word.
Right? Exactly. Like when I hear, like I'll see like somebody like Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
The state of woke media. I'm like, dude, maybe not, because I'm
like seeing it's like seeing somebody who's 80 years old dabbing. It's like, oh,
yeah.
That's when you know it's over. You're just like, oh man.
By the time the word gets to the lexicon of the nation at large, it's pretty much time to stop using that term.
It's over, right? And
yeah, it's pasteurized to a point where there is no, like, it doesn't even mean what it used to mean anymore.
Yeah, let me get back on your good side here, because the stuff you're talking about is, what are you qualified, and not on paper, not on a resume, but what are you qualified to talk about? And the conversation we just had about journalism, I think, is a good way to go in terms of discussing basically everything. So the two of you are journalists. You were telling me, educating me on what it was like behind the curtain. I have nothing to say to that. I've never done it. A good friend who's running this thing who's been in that room, but I would never, he could tell me all kinds of stories. I would never, ever try to pawn myself off as, an expert on journalism because Jahi told me a few stories. Right.
But we still get it wrong. Like there's still a lot wrong in the newsrooms.
It is.
There is.
It sucks when you get it wrong and you gotta go back in that newsroom. I'm sorry.
I believe
to say it sucks when you go back in the newsroom and you've gotten it wrong. That sucks. And old media, like you get it wrong and it's already sent to print. And so like the next day you've got to print a retraction or you got it wrong. I've seen a guy.
Okay, but where are those retractions printed? I mean, that's
dead the next day.
We've talked about retractions. Where do those end up on page 16? I mean, come on. The retraction model.
That retraction needs to be.
But getting past that, the point I was trying to make is when you're talking about things that you're not an expert on, and I probably come off a lot more arrogant than I really feel in my head. Like, I don't think I'm an expert on anything. I get angry when people quote me.
I don't get
that. It doesn't happen often.
I'm not feeling that at all.
Right.
I'm the McNugget. I'm pulling from Giants, right? If I'm quoting somebody else. But point is, I would never represent myself as being part of the journalistic club. But I do have experience with journalism in terms of consumer. And I think part of the problem that most people have is they don't know how to judge themselves properly, which is why you have a lot of people who will feel very well researched on a topic, something Amanda was touching on. You see it on a screen and you believe it. I don't know that that's much different, by the way, than people who read the New York Times and say, there it is.
Let me ask you that as this. So you brought up Tom Cotton earlier, and I looked it up.
I did too.
Did you? You looked it up, Amanda? So,
I read it. I don't agree with none of it, but I read it.
Okay. So perfect. So let's go into what he said, because I think it's still relevant today. I think what he said was something to the effect of send in the military to deal with protesters.
Bless you both.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so and then I think the New York Times actually apologized for running it.
Yes, I remember this. I don't remember reading that, but I remember the New York Times response to it.
It's like a 5-paragraph apology.
Yeah,
Before
it is one of the biggest mea
before
culpas
you
I've
even
ever
get
seen.
to the actual article, it's like a 5-paragraph apology.
So
about
let me ask you guys what you think of how the nation has addressed racism in general. I guess in a macro term, given where we are right now in society, we're trying to battle a once a century pandemic and once a week police brutality. It seems like how are we doing that at the same time? And how do we feel? Like on one side you have the Tom Cottons that are like, have the military go into residential neighborhoods and do what police should be doing. And then on the other side, you have what happened in, I want to say, was it Seattle, where they had the Chad, what was it called? Like the group of people who are like, there was like a no policing zone. And
right.
You know what I'm talking about? I can't remember.
I can't remember exactly if it's Seattle, but I remember, like, I know the concept of having like these, instead of cops, these other like professionals and whatnot, a group of people to deal with like mental health calls and I guess softer things. Is that what you're talking about? Or
no, there was something called the. I'm looking it up now. It was like a group in Seattle where protesters took over a few blocks downtown, and a police.
Okay, yeah.
And I think they called it the Chad, but I'm not. I can't remember.
Yeah, I've seen the. Okay, yeah.
Because the last word is zone. I don't know. I forget what it was.
It was like two totally different ways of addressing the protest. But I think the part that gets to me the most is the fact that you have people that are fighting against real systemic racism, issues that in 2020 we really shouldn't be dealing with anymore. And there's that, and there's real righteous anger and righteous cries for justice. And I think for some people that gets drowned out by broken windows and things that tend to happen during a protest, even though those things are by and large not anywhere in the least the most of the action is happening, but people will tend to focus on those things more than the righteous cause or the mission itself. So
it's called a Chaz. You were right. It's a Chaz.
Oh, so I said Chad with a D,
it's
not a Z. So it's okay. Chaz.
Chaz Zone.
What did it stand for, Amanda?
Capitol Hill Anonymous Zone. for short.
Right. And
but
so
it is a police-free, self-governing utopia.
Okay. See? So that was in one place, and then in the other place you got Trump clearing out
tear gassing folks.
Tear gassing peaceful protesters to take photo ops with a church he doesn't attend. So,
and a book he clearly does not read.
Right. I mean, I don't know, man. So I guess my question to you guys is like, what are your thoughts on that state, and which way do you lean toward as far as how to properly address these situations?
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
No, just a clarification. What specific situations?
Well, we're talking about the protests, number one.
Okay.
I mean, and because they're still having protests. They're not nearly as big as they were at the onset during George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. And I know I'm missing another one. It was like 4 all at one time. And then there was a guy in Atlanta that got shot at a Wendy's. And then, so like,
Yeah,
so
there's
every time they would start dying down, you know, when another one would, something else would happen, and it would like build up again. And then there was the kid Elijah that got killed, and we just found out about him. And he was killed, I want to say last August. And he begged them for, you know, an autistic kid who taught himself how to play the violin. And, you know, he's walking home, and somebody thought he looked dangerous, and he was barely a $140. And, you know, he can't go home to his parents. I mean, that stuff, I mean, it just tugs at you, because, you know, these people had lives, they had family, they had people that cared about them, and they're gone. And so, of course, when that happens and there is no consequence for it, the people who killed that kid are working desk duty. I mean, if I worked my job and I do it wrong, I get written up, I get demoted. I mean, I can get demoted for you know, not turning in my reports on time, right?
right.
They kill somebody and get demoted. Like, I mean, those are two totally different scales we're being weighed on. And my thing is that you have the power of life and death and on your hip at all times, and the presumption of innocence and immunity to prosecution. I would just think that, you know, we would have, you know, higher levels of accountability for them. So I get why people are protesting. But then, you know, those things also, there are also situations where, you know, anytime you protest, there are going to be people who take advantage of that protest. And I think that's kind of what's happening.
Yeah.
So my question to you guys again is like, should we as a country be more focused on the protests, or more focused on the, you know, the violence that comes with them? So, I mean, it's a weird question, I guess.
In terms of focusing, if I had to pick one or the other, I mean, I would have to pick focusing on the protests, because that helps me focus more on, I can wrap my head around that. It helps me focus more on what the message behind those protests is. The violence is going to pop up in any chaotic situation, and any chaos is going to erupt in any situation like that. And in terms of like, in my experience, from what I've experienced out here, when the wave of protest was kind of coming through, we were safe, and larger protesting groups started self-policing themselves. They kind of said, if you're here and you plan on being violent, we don't want you here. And so we had people, you know, so there were people calling folks out. There were other protesters guarding stores that loot, you know, and scaring off would-be looters.
Right.
And out in Pasadena, maybe one window got smashed. That was it. And they had protests going on for like 3 straight weeks, where they had, to be consciously safe, they had car protests where people would drive around in their cars, honk their horns, and they would surround City Hall and stuff like that, and they would stop, get out. There would be actual speakers. There would be the protests would actually be treated as events that would be that have the eyes of the right of all these official organizations and the city behind it. So that takes some of the heat out of it, because you have a lot of people there for the right reasons, outnumbering the people who are there for the wrong ones. And also, the most violent things I saw was maybe within the first week or so, some jackasses in a pickup truck, you know, MAGA guys or whatever, obviously probably not even from remotely near here, tried to drive through some of the protesters. They didn't get them. They didn't get anybody. Somebody else tried to drive through actually kind of hit someone, but that person, the injury, they got injured, but they're okay. And that person got busted within minutes. Like that's like so that got squashed. And then from there on in, through social media, of people saying like, hey, no, this, you know, a lot of people saying, okay, this protest is, I don't know if sanctioned is the right word, but like, this is a legit one, versus you know, the occasional like bad-hearted social media influencer who would just try to get people together and say it's for BLM, it's for BLM or George Floyd, and it really wasn't, and they just wanted to stir shit up.
Gotcha.
That they ended up getting swept. They ended up getting pushed to the side. Now, in other communities, though, they weren't as lucky, but it also brought awareness within I guess, the protesting movement to, not only look out for each other, especially when the protests would be like when someone would organize when people would organize a protest in like Van Nuys, which is very brown and has a lot of brown-owned businesses, and you had a lot of people going like, why would we go there with why would you attack there? Like,
right.
well, why would you do that? But if you're like in, I don't know, Santa Monica or something like that, yeah, there's a little more, there's property damage and a lot of other stuff going on. But back to what you're saying, the original question, focusing on the message behind the protest and using that as the fuel for however you want to protest. Because trying to predict and control the violence is like, I don't know. Certainly you don't need the military. You don't need tanks or anything like that.
He can't authorize. I'm sorry.
No, man, I want to hear what you're gonna say. Go for it.
No, like I'm thinking about how overarmed police forces are and how people want to be like, bring them in, and I'm like, why? Why would you want to do that?
Well, my point to this, and just to piggyback on what you said, they can't authorize. Donald Trump cannot authorize military presence anywhere.
That is the main. He can't make them do that.
Yeah, being a National Guard vet, because the National Guard is who they're going to call first before anybody. We work for the governor, so it would have been from whatever governor of the state that will call them out. It would never. He cannot mobilize Fort Bragg to go deal with Missouri. That will never, ever, ever happen. He would have to go through Senate, Congress. But back to the point.
There are a lot of people who would say no. Yeah, no, there are a lot of people who would say no. Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't see Governor Newsom going like, yeah, sure, let's bring it. No. He'd be like, what? Come on. But
my point.
He can't mandate that. Yeah. Like, he cannot summon them to make that happen. That's a good point. That shouldn't be brought up. Yeah.
To Jahi's question, with the protests, that's the start. And I think that's where we always fall into the hole, because we have a good start, but then we don't get the plan B going. So like, even with the protests now, they're starting to die down a little bit. Okay, what's the next step? We don't never go to that next step in the process. Like, even with the civil rights movement, did they protest first? Yes. Then they did what? They boycotted. Then they marched on Washington. Then they had a seat at the table. I mean, we don't get to that.
There were key things that Martin Luther King was talking to with politicians about. And I think LBJ was the guy he was talking to, right?
Yeah, but my point is,
and he was saying these are key things that we want to see implemented nationally, or bills passed.
We're gonna start over again. But that's my point. It seems like we get the younger generation, or even our older generation, black, white, brown, whatever, we get them mobilized and they get ready to go, and then we have no plan B. So then everybody starts to go home and get back into the same funk, and then something else happens.
Then the same thing happens again, and everybody scrambles back to attention.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good point.
And that's where I think with the protests we are now, like, it's starting to die down. Because, I mean, with social media and camera phones and everything else, for the past few years, they've been catching it all on camera. And nothing has changed, because we haven't got to that plan B. So that's where my frustration comes in. Like, what we gonna do next? We already did the protest. I guess now we're kind of boycotting because we say buy black owned. Okay, what's next? So that's where I'm at with I agree with you, Redmond, but my head is at what is the next step? Nobody can give us, we need the leaders to jump in and do that next step. And nobody has done that yet.
Yeah, we need like momentum, sustained momentum,
Mhm.
fueled by like penetrating action, basically, and
Yeah.
which means, you know, and I think in a lot of ways our you brought up social media and just a lot, and the younger generation, a lot of people aren't, they don't have that, they haven't demonstrated it, or they haven't shown that in them, because they will show up to a protest with all the intentions in the world, and they will donate, and that'll be it. Like,
So
they
this
will
is
be
the
like,
thing. I wonder if it's this. Like,
they'll be like, I did my part.
I think
And
we look at
that's
it
it.
now and say that, all right, well, we protested, we got everybody's attention, and I could be wrong. So, you know, if you know, even in the comment section, if you think I'm wrong, tell me why you think I'm wrong. But this is what I kind of think. I think when we say, well, what is plan B, or what is the next step in the plan? I think everybody's like, or not everybody, but a lot of people are like, oh, okay, well, we'll get Trump out. And then when Trump's out, everything will be fine, because Democrats will be in, and Democrats will solve all the problems.
No, these were problems before.
I think that is a very, very naive and optimistic thought process, because if that was going to happen, it would have happened in the last Democratic presidencies. You know?
Right.
I think
exactly.
they're like, oh, they'll solve everything.
Yeah.
As soon as that happens.
Which, no. Like,
and my thing is, I think we need that leader. Like, we don't have that one body to unify behind. I mean, not politician wise.
No,
I'm
you
just talking
mean
about
like some political leader that's not necessarily a politician, like a king or
yeah,
yeah, but
leader,
somebody.
a leader, somebody who just sort of emerges, right?
No, I was saying it tends to come with some health concerns.
Because another thing, the downfall is, once we do get somebody who emerged, they go through their social media and find something that they said 20 years ago and bring it back
they
up.
drop
and then
the wrong word, or
they can't kill you socially, they'll kill you literally. So
yeah, I think there's a flaw in the premise of your question, and that's,
break it down.
You talked about, you know, the police not doing their jobs appropriately. I think there's a good argument to suggest that they're doing their jobs exactly as they were designed to be done. And the Democrat that's coming in, that will likely win in November, was the guy who, frankly, we don't need the military to come in, whether Trump has the power to direct them to these cities or not. The police already have tanks. They already have body armor. They already have military-style weapons. And in places you wouldn't think they would have them. And that's primarily because of politicians like Joe Biden, who worked his entire career, including the Obama administration, in hyper-funding the police, providing grants and financial opportunities for incredibly rural, very low populated areas to get things like battle vehicles,
an armored personnel carrier.
Right. So there's that. Then there's, of course, the 94 crime bill. And this is a law and order guy. Remember, he was basically calling Reagan a wimp for his first stab at the war on drugs.
Who was
You're
doing
talking about one of the architects. And the reason I'm bringing this up isn't because
Biden was doing this?
Yes, that was Biden. I'm not trying to sway anybody's vote on the presidency. I am voting for Joe Biden. Let me be clear. But none of this gets cured by DNC picked candidates coming in. This only gets perpetuated, and that's because both sides of the aisle share a common interest in maintaining the status quo. And for people of color and people who are poor, the status is not quo. So that's the flaw in the. So we have the police who are set up like the military. They have military ranks, captain, sergeant. They are designed to break unions, to herd runaway slaves, and to protect private property from those who don't have it.
Jamie,
so
your dad was a policeman, right?
Yep.
When did you come to that conclusion?
Last night. Is that wrong?
I'm pretty sure you didn't come to that conclusion last night.
When I was 17 years old, and I'm 47 now, my father pulled me aside. He worked at Castaic Lake. Redmond, I am from Los Angeles as well. He pulled me aside, and the vast majority of the people, this is coming out of his mouth. I don't know that this is true. I don't have any numbers. I'm just repeating a conversation. His side of it was the vast majority of people who come to Castaic Lake, for which I helped to police, he was a sergeant, are Mexican, his words. And he said to me that he considered himself a racist because he had nothing but bad experiences with Mexicans. What he said was, I know that's wrong. I know that's wrong, but I can't help it because the people that I have to constantly, interfere with, and again, probably not true, it's just his perception, are all Mexican. And he was not a member of that community. He had to drive about an hour and 15 minutes each way. This goes back to the points everybody was making earlier about journalists who are working beats that they have no experience with. Part of the problem with policing is it's not designed to protect and serve anybody. The modus operandi of, especially in big cities, and this has been my experience because I've worked very closely with police forces in big towns and small towns in 3 different states, and my experience with them has been knock heads, ask questions later. The adrenaline that goes up for this, like they call this, the vast majority of drug warrants served is by the SWAT team.
Yep.
That's across the country. Not many people are aware of that, but there are heavily armed people who are doing nothing more than issuing a bench warrant. And the reason for it is because these guys need to be out doing stuff, advertising themselves and keeping their training up. So the people they're serving these drug warrants to, because of the war on drugs, are largely people of color. That's why I say, when we're talking about what the police are meant to do, I believe wholeheartedly all of these terrible shootings, I'm not saying that somebody's sitting with a pen and paper saying, today I'm going to knock off this young black man. That's not it. It's actually something, Jahi, more or less you are doing private conversations, and yes, I'm going there, forgive me. They, just like my dad, they're not people, they're pests.
Oh yeah, no, I mean I think that's how I think Dave Chappelle had a skit on it, a bit on it a long time ago, where he said something to the effect of, you ever notice that when they find a body, a black dude, they always say he always has crack sprinkled on him. Did you guys
sprinkle some crack on him? Yeah,
yeah. And he goes,
sprinkle some crack on him.
Yeah, let's get out of it. Like there's yeah, I had to shoot him. Looks like this is the old case where the guy broke in his house and hung up pictures of himself all over the place.
Yeah,
a dozen times. And he's like, "Oh, he's still here." Boom.
Yeah.
I want to wrap this
back on him and get
I want to wrap this up just a little bit. I'm sorry, because what I don't want to do is give the impression that if you asked most of the policemen that I grew up with and worked with in areas, and you said your department is full of racists, they'd be horrified. They don't see themselves that way. Most people who we might say, God,
this is
be self-aware.
And I wrote
real quick.
And I know
real quick. I'm sorry.
What you meant.
Let me wrap it up though. Just this point. They'd be horrified to hear that, but the institution of policing is the problem, and institutions are bigger than people. So if you have a culture, that's gonna. I'm sure there is such a thing as a quote good cop. Cops who, there's even a movie or two about them, who go up against their own departments, do the right things, stand up for the right things, and the end of those stories, they're bent, broken. They're made out to be an example, and that's real.
Yeah, I think, and I think that's the
Serpico.
part that
Yes.
I think back to the whole pest thing though. Like I think to put it, your brain searches for a way to try to figure out how it is that so many black males and black women are just killed so arbitrarily. And a kid begs for his life and he's begging for his life and they're like, yeah, I know. And then they're almost like pacifying the kid, like, just calm down, it'll all be over soon. And it's almost so rote and so clinical, how they do it. Like the guy had his knee on the dude's neck, George Floyd's neck, and he's got his hands in his pockets,
He's
probably
deadpan.
thinking about like
his facial expression was just, it's
yeah,
another day at the office.
I got a groundhog that I just cannot get rid of. It's kind of like that one in Caddyshack. And like I just say to myself, like if I could just get this damn groundhog off my property, my life would be so much better. And
You know what?
I
My
think
grandfather used to tell us put urine in his hole. It sounds crazy, but it works. Because we had one in our backyard. You pour urine in the hole, they go away. I'm sorry. That was just a little.
I will try that.
Writing that down.
It works. I'm sorry.
I'm sure if you pour urine on most anything, whatever it is will go away.
Okay. And I've had this damn thing for about 2 or 3 years.
Been doing it wrong the whole time, Jahi.
I've trapped it. I've taken it to the riverbank, and then I'll come home, and like 2 or 3 weeks later, the damn thing is back in my yard, eating the side of my patio. I'm like infuriated, man. Like now I got to replace boards.
It's time for a urine grenade.
Hey, trust me, you're gonna be coming back to me in a few weeks. Like, darn it, it worked. But
I mean, that's the only thing that it can explain to me, because you can kill a rabid dog like that. I can go and kill a groundhog, and so I'm not going to jail for that. But then you see how police are arbitrarily killing these people, and they're like, man, look, I had to kill him. I feared for my life. There was one lady.
Yeah, it's those magic words. I feared for my life and the life of my around me or my fellow officers.
They killed Philando Castile. They killed him. He told him he had a gun. They said, put your hands down and up and reach for your wallet. So basically, it's multiple choice, and all the answers equal. Your ass is getting shot today. Yeah. And so my thing is, it's like, they feel better. Like almost like if a spider is under your couch, he ain't thinking about you, but you want him dead, right? Because you'll feel a lot better about sitting down and relaxing on that couch if you could just kill that spider. And I kind of think on a subconscious level, that's how some police feel when it comes to killing us.
Yeah, and then I also think like the biggest misconception is that all Black people think all police officers are racist. And I don't think we don't. I mean, I know there's some, like the old saying, there's always some bad apples in the bunch. But if I get in trouble right now, the first people I'm gonna call is the police. And I think that's like the biggest thing that they put out there, that Black people don't like the police or brown people don't like the police. It's not that. It's just we don't want to get shot.
How many police do you exactly? I kind of feel some kind of way. I don't want to feel a bullet on the inside. I don't feel like I'm alone in that. And I know a lot of police officers. I got police officers in my family. I got some that work on the force here in town. I got some work on the force where I'm from that are relatives. And they'll be the first people to tell you too, like, hey, yeah, there's some real issues that go on, but yeah, you definitely have some good people. And I think when I hear people tell me like, hey, you shouldn't criticize them because like if there's a problem, who are you going to call first? My response to that is, and this isn't directed to you, Amanda, because this is the people who say you should never criticize. They say, like, I had a white lady tell me that the other day, because she was like, yeah, you talk all that trash about what they should fix, but you know, when it all comes down to it, you go call them if there's a problem. I'm like, all right, then. So then that means you should never call your cable provider or your cell phone company ever again, because you know you're going to use that cell phone and you know you're going to use your cable. So never make a complaint.
But
Right.
see, my
Well,
thing is,
no,
being in the military, we would never allowed to use that "I fear for your life" excuse. Like if I was on the battlefield right now and there was 100 insurgents in front of me, all ready to kill me, if they don't fire that first shot, or if I don't see something that provides imminent danger for everyone around, I'm going to get court-martialed. I'm going to jail. There was no, oh, I shot all of them because they were there and I feared for my life. That's why I just can't, for the life of me, fathom how I fear for my life is a viable
It's a
excuse.
defense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like in
All
the
these
military,
unarmed people getting killed, and they're like, well, look, man, he looked like there was one lady in Arkansas. She got put on unpaid leave because she killed a guy because he was a big dude, and she said, I feared for my life. He was unarmed. She killed him. They said that it was justifiable because, yeah, he was in fact a large person. And then she got all her back pay, and now she does speaking tours on how to beat charges that she faced. Like she now has she has now turned it into a cottage industry.
and like I said, that
I'll
was
post
never
the lady's
allowed.
name down here in the bottom corner. But when this goes to YouTube, but it's real out here.
yeah, Amanda, just to bolster your point, I've read probably now 5 or 6 articles on people from the military coming out and saying exactly what you said. It's almost like you were reading for Audible.
But yeah, we were, because like I was National Guard. I know I said that already, but we had to riot train. Like that was a part of our training every year. I had to put on the full little battle rattle and get out there and do that hub with the stick and everything else. Even then, we were told, if you pull your stuff out and you shoot somebody or you hit somebody who was unarmed, that was our life right there on spot. So we're trying to figure out, like, how are police officers who are supposedly trained getting away with this?
Because of what they're being trained to do. Like the big. So if you're in social work circles, probably 5 years back, the new big thing was bridges out of poverty. So for the police version of that is called warrior training. So it's this really awesome chemistry between sort of a designed class / racial hatred combined with adrenaline style policing, meaning you go in, you knock heads, ask questions later. And how often they get it wrong. So like the bench warrants I was talking about, the ones were delivered by members of SWAT with the full battle regalia and everything. The percentage, it's difficult to get measurements because there's absolutely no legal requirement in most states and in most cities for police to record any data on violent interactions with the public up to and including death by gun, death by taser, death by baton. But how often they got the wrong address and like would shoot people's dogs and brutalize, all in the name of the war on drugs, of course, but the training that they receive is all based on the adrenaline theory. And I'm not saying all of them. Let me be clear, I did say all of them. It's not all of them. But like, if you live in a big city, you're more likely than not. There was an article, and I can't remember which state that came out, where the mayor said, you're getting this training. And the chief of police there stepped outside and said, if you pay for this training and you take it on your own time, it's fine. So like, the people were polled and were against it. The mayor said no, and the police did it anyway.
So let me ask you this. I mean, I think, when we've had these conversations in the past, or when I've had these conversations in the past, I point out things that I think can help. A couple things I think will work is paying police departments and paying police more money. Because I think if they got paid more, you would get a higher caliber of employee. I think that there needs to be standardized training, standardized oversight. I think just like if I have to be I have to have certification to be a project manager, and I have to do so many thousands of hours in order to even take a test to be certified. I think if you're going to go into an area that you don't live in, that you should have already done hundreds or at least thousands of hours of community service in that area, so that by the time you get there, you already know the people. But I'm also thinking, I had this thought yesterday, and one of the ways that America was able to kind of destroy the infrastructure of organized crime, especially when it came to La Cosa Nostra, was the RICO laws, right? Where they were able to go after your money, they were able to go after your family's money, and that was able to kind of break the hold that organized crime had in a lot of industries. I think if we were able to do something similar with police departments, I think it would root out bad cops, in the sense that, say, for instance, you know, how much money do you think George Floyd's family is going to get from the city of Minneapolis, right? What if that money, instead of coming from the city, came from the fraternity of police, or came from the police pension fund? Or what if you know, every time they had to pay out, that money had to come from, and say they found certain officers who knew things and never reported it. If that money comes out, you now owe, kind of like how if my wife left and she divorced me and now I have to pay alimony or child support, that is going to be stuck with you on no matter where I work, that money is going to follow me. So if I know a guy over here is doing something bad and I don't say anything and it comes out that I knew, and the police or the city's on the hook, my pocket is also on the hook. Like how do you think that would kind of break that thin blue line that kind of stops good cops from saying stuff about bad cops?
No, I think almost that they almost need to have an associate's degree in it. You know, like make this an actual education. And then like after they graduate, just like nurses and doctors and technicians, every 1 or 2 years they have to get recertified.
I gotta get my certification again for project management.
They have to get recertified, so they'll have to do continuous education and make it that, because you know, like firefighters, some of them have associate degrees in fire science. Do the same with police officers. Make them go to school. Like I said, make it a 2-year program, and then once they're done, they have to get certified, and they have to keep getting that recertification. I think it will weed out, probably not all, but some of the bad seeds, especially those who get fired from one area and then they move across town to a suburb and get rehired.
That's what happened to Tamir Rice. Tamir Rice's killer left the city he was in and went to some little suburb and got a job. And then when the newspapers showed up, he quickly resigned. But the fact is like, how the hell did that guy get another job? You shot a kid in a park with a toy gun and you didn't even put the car in park. And there was
if they get fired, you snatch that certification back. And just like if you try to move to another state, all of that stuff track. So I think that, to me, that'll be one of the better ways.
I think so.
I like that idea.
My friend, he was a truck driver and he abandoned his truck because he got drunk one night. He drove for Walmart, and it was like Christmas Eve. He got pissy drunk and he called in sick and left his truck in a parking lot with all the stuff. A big ass truckload of stuff to get prepared. It was either right before Christmas or right before Black Friday. It was one of the two. And he got pissy drunk. And so he called in sick, told him where the truck was. Of course, Walmart came and got that damn truck, and they promptly fired him. And then they put something on his, I think it was his CDL, but it
Mhm.
blackballed him for any truck driving job across the country.
So he cannot be a truck driver.
He can, but he has to be one for one of those shady outfits that makes you drive like 72 hours nonstop.
Oh.
He has to drive.
Oh, right. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely right. We can do that for a guy that drives Walmart trucks, but we can't do that for police officers.
Guys who carry guns.
Mhm. And probably one of their continuous education trainings could be no fear, so they can stop being scared of everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think honestly, we need to nuke our current narrative on what police are. I think the defund police movement, whatever you think of the slogan, it's far more successful than I gave it credit for. But the meat behind it is stop using police. Part of the problem is we have put an unfair burden on their shoulders. They're now everything. Ever since Reagan disbanded the mental health care system in this country, starting with California, the cops are now asked to do things that you couldn't train one person to do.
Yeah, like I had a runaway when I had a runaway at my house.
Yeah,
the people who ended up showing up weren't social workers; it was a police officer. And the girl already had told us that she had had trauma with her family, and violence and police because she got taken out of her home and found herself at our house. So yeah, I mean that guy's not trained for that.
Right. And that's the thing. If we changed our concept of what policing is, when you had an autistic kid walking around not necessarily bothering anybody, the first contact that they have with what I envision a new police force wouldn't be a guy with a gun. It would be somebody who starts the dialogue. And all of this fear that they have is largely self-generated in my experience. I've been on a lot of ride-alongs. I've seen a lot of stuff firsthand. And the first response is the threat of violence. Being arrested is violence. So, I mean, and once you're arrested, on some occasions, depending on what enterprising young journalist gets their hands on it and how important the reason why they got arrested was to the community they got arrested in, the arrest is enough on their lives. This is big stuff, starting from the point of context. So nuke our concept of policing. The pay stuff, I kind of agree with, but bring it back to the responsibility of the community to determine what the hiring practices are going to be, what the educational requirements are going to be, what the licensing requirements are going to be, and make some of those things, like you mentioned, federal. In other words, again, get a license, just like a nurse, just like a doctor, just like a truck driver. If you screw up in certain ways, you're canceled.
Yeah.
You're done.
So let me ask you this.
Badge again. But I also think we do need to have some kind of brute force on very few occasions, but still have it available. And with that, you don't walk out with a gun unless you check it out. I can't tell you how many Western industrialized countries already do this.
Yes, they do.
We used to pride ourselves on being exceptional, and the only thing we're exceptional on, and I stole this from Newsroom, the number of people who believe that angels are real and obesity. I mean, otherwise we are behind the ball compared to even a lot of places we call third world countries. Cuba has a better medical system than we do by every practical measure. So I could go on and on with that, but yeah, I think our modern notion of policing needs to fundamentally change, and then get specific after you set up that broad philosophical framework on how to fill in the blanks. Go ahead.
So with that being said, I thank you guys for being able to come on. One last question. This is something I'm doing different today. It's called unsolicited advice. So I'm just going to go around to each Brady Bunch Square and ask what your unsolicited advice is for the day. And Redmond, I guess we'll start with you.
Invest time in reading books and anything that regarding things that you are uncomfortable with. I mean, use the protests and as a springboard to kind of expand your mind and really sit down and read it and try to understand it and have those difficult conversations within your, diversify your inner monologue a little bit through reading. That's what I would suggest.
Amanda?
Dang, he stole mine.
Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say have those difficult conversations with people, but I think I'll take it a step further, and not just with adults. We got these kids running around with absolutely nothing to do, and you almost got to be like a big brother, big sister, and take one, like each one teach one. I'm gonna still line off of Insecure, and like adopt a kid and help them so that they know what to do when they turn 18, or even if they're 18 in November with these elections. We got to start educating these younger minds so that when it's their time, they're actually ready and not just walking around with their heads in the clouds.
Jamie?
Be skeptical, not cynical. Believe nothing, but don't hate anything. But being part of things, it's a lot of what Amanda just said, and a little bit of what Redmond just said. You got to engage. When you withdraw, nothing gets better. So believe people can change, because they can, but I'll believe it when I see it at the same time.
Gotcha. And I would just say, put on a damn mask.
Yeah. And vote.
And vote. I mean, when we're the only civilized first world nation where we politicize common sense. Where there is a significant portion of the country that really truly believes that the Center for Disease Control is giving them fake news, and Chuck Woolery is a more trusted and valued source of scientific information. Put a mask on. And if you really cared about getting your life back to normal, and you really cared about getting those kids back in school, then we would all do the things that we could do that are free and cheap, which is putting a damn mask on. And maybe, I've heard doctors say that if we were all to really do that, in 60 days, we could be living somewhat of a normal life.
Yeah, I heard somebody said 4 to 8 weeks. If everybody put a mask on, it's like 4 to 8 weeks and would probably be good.
This is the only country. I mean, there's conservatives and liberals all over the world.
And there's people who are like, no.
This is the only country where it is literally, if you put a mask on, it's because you're a filthy liberal. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And every time they show the color charts of the states, and you see more and more states turning red. I think we talked about this earlier. They said Florida, if it were its own country, would be ranked number 4 as far as coronavirus infections and deaths. It's ridiculous. Put a freaking mask on and let's move on with our lives. I got 2 kids at home. One is supposed to be going to school, and he's, and he can't go because it's unsafe to go. And the people that are telling you it's safe to go are also making you sign waivers that you won't sue them if you die, if you go see them. So
what is that?
They're lying to you. Put a mask on. That's all I'm saying.
I feel like the U.S. is playing the Oregon Trail.
What's that?
I feel like the U.S. is playing the Oregon Trail and deciding to cross the river the wrong way. Like they always want to try to cross the river, and we don't know how deep it is. And then, the wagon, you're the one that stocked up the carriage with all ammo and no food, no money. All ammo, no food. because
Yeah.
I really want to get in everybody's face here, man. Once again, you're challenging our narrative exceptionalism. We are number one. We are now number one in the number of people who are infected with this disease in the world, followed right behind by Brazil. Number one with a bullet. Sing it. We're number one. USA.
Listen, guys, it's really been a pleasure, and I appreciate you guys for coming on for such on such short notice. So
appreciate you, man. Thank you.
No
Thanks.
problem. This
Thanks
was
to everybody.
fun.
This was cool.
Thank you,
right?
everybody.
It's very cool. This is pretty awesome.